Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow, and welcome back to another action-packed, fun-filled episode of Iowa's premier conservative podcast. I'm back here in studio today with John Hendrickson. We've got the true believers here, just him and I, ready to excite you and thrill you with the latest in taxes in the state of Iowa. So it's great. John, you and I can just get it done.
Yes,
it works.
This is insights and analysis.
That's right. What is it? A hastily prepared? And yeah. Okay. Well, that's exactly what it is. So, okay. Well, first things first, we have endeavored to have a regular segment here on the show of what did John get in the mail, and we've had unwrappings of some of his new to add to the collection, but. You got something a little bit different, so we're gonna get off track just a little bit off of taxes. But what'd you get in the mail today, John?
Well, I've been feeling left out because you and I believe Chris and some of our other colleagues have all received a nice flyer from, and this is not an endorsement, but from Perry Johnson, who is running for the Republican presidential nomination, and I finally got one yesterday, and so I feel because I've been an active voter, and I thought, why haven't I been getting one? And so, but looking at the brochure, it's kind of interesting because I give credit to anybody who wants to address our debt crisis and sort of the fiscal problems that we're facing as a nation. But I just feel good that I got one, and that's also exciting because it's really we're in the caucus season, and I enjoy. Right. Political flyers, and I collect them, so this is going in my collection.
I got my second one yesterday, and it's really nice mail. With the interesting one, the first one, I didn't know what the plan was, and it wasn't apparent on the flyer, but maybe it's just because I'm a junkie. I looked it up. So the flyer prompted me to actually go to the website, which is probably the mark of an effective piece of mail. Although I forgot to tell you earlier, John, we were talking about this. Mine, for whatever reason, when they go to the mail shop and they print the name and the address. It's actually sent to my dad.
Oh, okay.
At what at my address, and I thought, well, Noah pointed it out to me, my 12-year-old, and like, well, why did they send this to Grandpa here? Like, I have no idea, but maybe initially they had you modeled as not as being a fiscal conservative, and
that could be,
and so they were just it was more targeted, but they figured they'll expand their universe to try and get the more squishy fiscal people like John Hendrickson on there.
Right.
So and maybe they'll get to me at some point. But
the other thing I forgot to share with you that I got in the mail actually last week was I found some trading cards from the 1992 election, and there were 4 trading cards of Pat Buchanan.
Oh, lovely.
And so
the set it wasn't a Buchanan set. It was just the candidates.
Yeah, just the candidates, and there was 4 of them on Pat specifically.
So like on the back of a presidential candidate trading card, and I know you're not a sports guy, but I'm guessing it doesn't have his batting average and home runs and all that. Like what's on the back of a Pat Buchanan 92 trading card, John?
One was his view of the economic policy, and the other one was his view on foreign policy. And,
great.
And then another one was just his picture of him at a campaign event.
Great.
And the America First agenda. So
that's what I was looking for. That's just wonderful. Have I told you about the Trump made playing cards we have at home?
No.
Which I still haven't brought into the office. I've never told you about it yet. So in the 2016 election, and I don't know how we came across these, but it was a version of Old Maid, only it was Trump made.
Oh, wow.
And it had all these cartoon characters of all the different presidential candidates and the nicknames
that's awesome.
that Donald Trump had given them. And then the Old Maid was Crooked Hillary.
Okay.
So if you ended up at the end, and we played that, I mean, the cards are tattered and worn because at that point the kids all wanted to play cards, and so we just played Trump made, and I would always just sit there and giggle like, this is the President of the United States, but yet here we are.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, John, let's talk about property taxes. And we said we would do this in the last episode, that we'd come back after the House and the Senate here have each passed their property tax bills finally off of the floor. of the House and the Senate. And so each chamber is in possession of the other one's bill. And presumably now we can get down to the real business of figuring out what the legislature collectively wants to do on property taxes. Most folks out there that are frustrated and mad because of their assessment notice or whatever the thing is that makes them mad probably don't care a lot about the inside baseball stuff, but we're here to tell you about it anyway. Yeah. But each of those bills passed with only one no vote in each chamber, which I thought was interesting, is that I think that's evidence of the Republican or Democrat, liberal, conservative, is that there's a shared interest that we need to do something because people are mad. The one lone no vote in the Senate was a liberal Democrat. The one no vote in the House was a pro-taxpayer Republican. So anyway, I don't have a takeaway on all that, but it was interesting. So we kind of want to go down what's in each of these bills and what we think might come out of the mix once this is all done. So, and John, I mean, I kind of made a little list here, but, and I can, of what they are, but the House files is House File 718. The Senate file is 561. What's in the House bill? Or if I'm putting you on the spot too much, I can run off of my notes here.
No, I think the major parts of the House bill is the Division 1, the first, and I don't remember how many divisions, but was the buying down of the school levy, which goes from 540 to 440.
Yeah, and we won't go too far into how the school funding formula works, but part of the funding formula, the lion's share of the property tax part is you pay for every $1,000 that your house is worth, or in taxable value, you pay $5.40. That would take it down to...
Yeah, it goes down $1.
Okay.
And so... but then what that does is it's also shifting it to the state general fund. But then there was an amendment that was added on to the final bill that would pay for that through the Taxpayer Relief Fund, which we have some problems with, which we can talk about.
Right.
The other part of it, I think, is the second division, which deals with they had in the previous bill, which was pretty poor policy, I have to admit, was the assessment limit, but now that changed to, if I understand correctly, a 3% limit that your total taxes paid can't grow more than 3% for residential, and it's 8% for commercial industrial. Am I correct on that?
That sounds right.
And so that was a change from the original language, and then the other major part of it was, which the Senate also has, is a portion of that truth in taxation that we talked about in the last program, direct notification, where local governments would be required to send an extensive notice to taxpayers, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some other divisions of that, but I think those were the three main ones.
Right, I think that's right. And we can come back to some of the differences in a minute. The Senate version, I'm going to back up a minute, because both the House and the Senate version have take a stab at this idea of adjustment of the levy rate or holding the growth down. And both of those efforts, I think, are very well intentioned. And both of them showcase just how complicated the whole process really is, because there's so many moving parts trying to get at it. And it's a reason that there's maybe not a perfect solution here, but at least on that piece, on the levies and everything. But on the Senate file, the Senate bill is 561, which has a couple of the pieces that are similar to the House version and some other new stuff. So what do you have in that?
Yeah, the Senate one, excuse me, that deals more on it. They take sort of a different approach where they focus on consolidating the levies, which is something that we recommended in our property tax toolkit. It also creates a ratchet effect. Another thing that we sort of promoted is that when assessments go up, the levies will be ratcheted down, and so that will provide sort of a limitation, if you want to call it, on that. And then they also provide, in addition to the consolidating the levies, I believe it, and I'm drawing a blank, but it repeals is it PEPL?
Yeah, it does that, and it gets rid of some other smaller stuff,
yes.
like brucellosis, and
Yeah. And so there is some levies that go away, and then they also have a fairly extensive direct notification process in there, and then I'm sure I'm missing something else.
Right. But yeah, there's doing some things with some of the credits for military and senior things. Thematically, the similar pieces between the two would seem to be some notification system to, as we talked about in the last episode, to let folks know what their own bill is going up and when they can do something about it, and some limitations on local government's ability to bond. Right?
Yes,
I mean, those are similar between the two of them. They both also take a stab at whether it's ratcheting or growth increases, some way to try and restrain that. There's two, so, which is, I think, broadly speaking, what Truth in Taxation, as we've talked about for several years, contains. So, those are good. A couple of things. Neither one of these bills are the solution to property taxes in Iowa. And that point, I think, was made, I heard it a little bit more in the Senate debate, but that an awareness that a complicated system like this is going to take multiple years, multiple versions of a bill just to even try and bend the curve down. It's not like when you pass an income tax bill where, okay, we're going to 3.9% flat tax. There's your big win. And it is. What a big win is in property taxes is much more elusive than any of that. Yeah. So okay, let's turn to a couple of things that we need to point out that probably aren't great. And one is, as you mentioned, John, the House on the floor, as they were passing their bill, changed where the money was coming from for their buy down of the school funding formula. And that is now being paid for out of the Taxpayer Relief Fund. Right. Yeah. And that's just we just have a philosophical problem with that, because the Taxpayer Relief Fund, well, there's two problems that we have with that. The Taxpayer Relief Fund was created for the purpose of cutting income taxes, and we believe it should be used for that and redirecting those funds someplace else, just like when we had the rollback assessment fix. We didn't like that idea then, and we don't like it now.
That's right.
And it, by most accounts, we're going to be having an income tax conversation next year. And so those dollars need to be available for that. But secondly, is that the way I read that language that they added on there is that the Taxpayer Relief Fund will pay for this buy down until it can't anymore and it's gone. Then what? Then the general fund picks it up.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're signing up, that bill would sign up the taxpayers for this ongoing obligation, but only a source of funds to pay for it for a certain number of years. And then you just have a built-in hole in the budget. And so it doesn't seem like long-term. Now, there's a lot of money in the Taxpayer Relief Fund right now, but whether that's 8-10 years, whatever that would be, when those dollars are gone, then where do you go from there? Are you going to raise the taxes back up again? So give me your thoughts. I know you are very passionate about this Taxpayer Relief Fund idea. Yeah. Even more so than I have been on the issue.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely correct on what you just outlined. I mean, that's completely solid. But as you said, I think the original intent of that fund was for income tax. And you look at why we have the Taxpayer Relief Fund, it's because of the overcollection of income and sales taxes. And also, I view the Taxpayer Relief Fund as a very responsible way to lower income taxes. And we know, we've heard from Governor Reynolds as well as other members of the legislature that their goal would be to ultimately eliminate the income tax. And for example, we've talked on a previous program about Senator Dawson's bill that was introduced that would actually use the Taxpayer Relief Fund for that objective. And so even if, let's just say, you don't eliminate the income tax, you can still use the Taxpayer Relief Fund to go to lower that 3.9 flat tax rate, or even to speed up the cuts.
Right.
So there's ways you can use that fund responsibly for tax reform. And the other thing, my concern is if you start using it for property taxes, it without proper limitations on local government budget limitations, it then basically is not only a tax shift, but it's also providing a subsidy to local governments that you're not going to solve. You're not going to get much relief out of that, because once that's over, it's over.
Right. And so, that's right, John. We started the entire conversation, at least you and I did, on property taxes, is that the solution, the real core solution, was restraints on local government spending. And maybe we sort of get at that sideways through some of the recalculation of the levy and some of that. But I think there's just a sense that maybe it's a missed opportunity if we can't get at some of that. But you mentioned that this is a tax shift, and that's exactly what it is. Look, these dollars that are in the Taxpayer Relief Fund that's money that Iowa income tax, sales taxpayers have overpaid into the state general fund, and now we're going to take that and just move it over to property taxpayers. Well, it's a different class of payers. So it just doesn't strike me as the right way to go about this.
Another thing that I want to bring up, and this is more of a philosophical debate, but we heard this both in the Senate and the House, is, what is considered the most damaging tax?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was quite a bit of conversation on that.
And I know that property tax is the most hated tax, but I would argue that the most damaging economically is the income tax, even more so than property or sales. And so I think it's in the best interest and I'm not saying this does not mean we can't do property tax, but this is why I think protecting the Taxpayer Relief Fund is so important, because it's in the economic well-being of Iowa, both individuals and businesses, to have a more competitive income tax code.
Right.
And you can still do property tax relief without, having this complicated system of getting into there and using those funds to buy down rates, which may not work.
Yep.
And I just have to get a shout out to Senator Busolo, because I really thought he did a good job of defending, kind of a very fiscal conservative position in one of the Senate Ways and Means committee meetings, talking about the benefits of pro-growth tax reform, and a lot of people, it's too bad more people couldn't have heard what he had to say, because I thought he did a really good job in defending that.
Yeah, he's very skilled at articulating fiscal conservatism, no question. So. And I want to circle back a little bit to John on the scope of either one of these bills. I've heard some people suggesting hundreds of millions of dollars of savings in both chambers. I heard $200 million of savings coming out of the House. Even some suggestions that the Senate bill could rise to $500 million in savings. So, and I've seen some of this chatter that the $200 million would be a 20% savings in property taxes in Iowa. And you brought in some numbers, John, but just to set the stage for just how much we pay in property taxes in Iowa, you pulled this out, and this is from LSA.
Yes, yeah.
But $6.47 billion were paid in 2022 in property taxes, all taxing authorities, cities, county, school, on down the line. So just short of $6.5 billion. And the school funding sum total of property taxes paid is $2.655 billion. Well, whether you're looking at $200 or $500 million, that's in the single digits of savings of of this. So we need to be careful of kind of how we talk about the magnitude of this. And look, if it's $200 million on $6.5 billion, it's about 3% that you're saving. And that's in a tax shift. It's not, look, any tax savings is good savings, but at what cost?
Yeah.
And I think that what it comes back to the bigger picture that we've talked about, John. We need to bend down the curve, not try and find a silver bullet savings, because we won't. The scope of the problem is just too big. There's just too many dollars moving through there. We have to restrain local government. And the system needs to be more transparent. So, maybe we're getting at some of that, but in other ways, look, as a former legislator, I can tell you that anytime you pass a bill, you're going to want to claim that it's a major win. That's just the nature of it, right? You got to go out and sell it to folks, and that's fine. But the problem is so vast that we need to take, how do you eat an elephant, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I think that's what we need to be serious about and honest about.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. And, we've looked at some other examples, and I know I keep bringing up Utah in terms of their property tax system, which is completely different. But I mean, when they implemented truth in taxation in the 80s, I mean, it took a while for that to work. And so, people also have to have a realistic expectation that they're not going to see tremendous relief right away, because it takes a while to start bending that curve down. And our system is unique because, we don't have a lot of, and correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have a lot of state aid going to local governments like other states. I mean, some states have, a large part of their budgets that go to local government aid, which kind of,
we do to schools, but not the cities and counties are different. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it takes time. And just like income tax, we, passing that flat tax last year, yes, it would be great. A lot of people said, well, why can't we do it right away? You have to do it gradually because, Iowa has to balance their budget. We can't run deficits like the federal government or some of these other blue states are doing. And so you have to do this in a very responsible, prudent way. And so and property taxes it's not only complicated, but it's hard to find a solution because there's so much. I think Senator Dawson said there's so many. You mess with one thing, it causes an effect on somewhere else. So.
Yeah, that's especially true in his levy consolidation idea, and it's really hard to put that back into one thing. Well, and So I said at the outset, I didn't want to bore anyone with a lot of inside baseball stuff, and I think that's kind of what we did. But the underlying philosophy behind all this, I think, is important to talk about. It sounds like we've been somewhat negative, and I don't mean for it to come out that way. I still think that both the House and the Senate really truly want to try and take a swing at this problem. Yes. They hear voters, and they are trying to come up with solutions to provide some relief on behalf of voters. And that is great, and that is, please carry forth. We just want to have eyes wide open of what real solutions over time look like. And still above all of that, which I think we're getting at with truth and taxation, is the real solution lies with local citizens in these districts rising up and getting this. The real solutions lie with elected officials at the local level more so than they do the state legislature.
That's right.
And so hopefully that a notification system of some kind can help us get down that path. So good. It's progress. It's all progress.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and we're running towards the end. What is Friday, the last day of that when per diem runs out?
I think so. Yeah. I think they are nearing the end. The issue, you see the issue set narrows, becomes more refined. There really aren't many issues that they have to address. The pieces are in place. And as soon as they sort of tie a bow on a budget number, and then it's just sort of filling in blanks, and there are a few days that are needed to actually write the bills and move them through the system. But that's 2 to 3 day process. So I think there's every opportunity that they could reach a budget deal, figure out what they want to do on property taxes, and be done next week. That is absolutely possible. So, and that'd be good. They've gotten a lot done this year. It's been I think a positive year for Iowa taxpayers. And I think there's going to be at least some sort of at least modest victory on property taxes, and it'll be a good year. So, all right, John. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We get rid of Ingstad and we go overtime.
Yes. Yeah.
Nobody to rein us in. We can stay here all day.
That's right.
Okay, good. All right. Well, with that, thank you, John. And thank you, listeners. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and share the information far and wide. And with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.